Hey friends, welcome back to the Irony Shelf. Tonight we continue Volume 1 with O. Henry's Memoirs of a Yellow Dog. In the brownstone parlors of old Manhattan lies a world seen only by those close to the ground. Some of the most biting critiques and profound insights may come from overlooked corners of the room. If you too have a soft spot for life's little ironies, do subscribe to our growing circle for new classics every Thursday. Now, grab an honest drink like a sarsaparilla or a cold lager, and let us meet the Cynical Companion. New York, 1905, a city of vertical ambitions and cramped elegance. In the fashionable flats of Manhattan, the air is thick with the scent of floor wax, overboiled cabbage, and the faint, sweet perfume of ladies who spend their afternoons playing bridge whist. Here, the grand brownstones are being divided into suites, gilded cages where the wallpaper is velvet and the conversation is hollow. Outside, the rhythmic clip-clop of hansom cabs on the asphalt provides a steady heartbeat to a neighborhood obsessed with appearances. But inside these heavy oak doors, behind the lace curtains, a different kind of drama is unfolding. One observed by a critic who sits just 6 inches off the floor, watching the ankles of high society passing by. From this low vantage point, the world is a forest of mahogany chair legs and the suffocating scent of lavender-watered lace. While the humans discuss the rising price of theater tickets, our cynical protagonist tracks the frantic tapping of a nervous foot, or the way a heavy velvet curtain tracks the afternoon heat. To him, the Gilded Age isn't a collection of grand ideas, but a series of obstacles. Tapestry rugs that hold the dust of 1,000 ignored walks, and the sharp, clinical smell of the love taps delivered by his doting mistress. And here, dear listener, we begin our story. I don't suppose it will come as a shock to any of you to read a contribution from an animal. Mr. Rudyard Kipling and a good many others have demonstrated the fact that animals can express themselves quite profitably. No magazine goes to press nowadays without an animal story in it, except, perhaps, the old-fashioned monthlies that are still clinging to the dusty news and faded tragedies of years gone by. But you needn't look for any high-flown literature in my memoirs. None of that fancied talk you might find from the bears, the snakes, or the tigers in the great jungle books. A yellow dog that spent most of his life in a cheap New York flat, sleeping in a corner on a discarded sateen underskirt, the one she spilled port wine on at that most unlikely of gatherings, the Lady Longshoreman's banquet, shouldn't be expected to perform any literary tricks with the art of his speech. I was born a yellow pup. Date, locality, pedigree, and weight unknown. I was, you might say, a veritable street urchin of the canine world. The first thing I can recollect, an old woman had me in a basket at Broadway and 23rd, trying to sell me to a fat lady. Old Mother Hubbard was talking me up to beat the band, as a genuine Pomeranian, Hambletonian, Red Irish, Cochin China, Stoke Pogis Fox Terrier. The fat lady fumbled through the fabric swatches in her shopping bag until she finally cornered a $5 bill and handed it over. From that moment, I was a pet, a mama's own little darling. Say, gentle reader, have you ever had a 200-pound woman, radiating a cloud of pungent camembert cheese and heavy Spanish perfume, scoop you up and press her nose against you, all while cooing in an operatic soprano? Oh, who's a sweet little Oodlum-Doodlum-Skoodlums? From a pedigreed yellow pup, I grew up to be an anonymous yellow cur, looking like a cross between a long-haired Persian cat and a box of lemons. But my mistress never caught on. She thought that the two primeval pups that Noah chased into the ark were merely a collateral branch of my ancestors. It took 2 policemen to keep her from entering me at the Madison Square Garden for the Siberian Bloodhound Prize. I'll tell you about that flat. The house was the ordinary thing in New York, paved with Parian marble in the entrance hall and cobblestones above the first floor. Our flat was 3, well, not flights, climbs up. My mistress rented it unfurnished and put in the regular things: 1903 antique faded upholstered parlor set, color print of geishas in a Harlem tea house, potted rubber houseplant, and Husband by Sirius the Dog Star. There was a biped I felt sorry for. He was a little man with sandy hair and whiskers a good deal like mine. Henpecked? Well, toucans and flamingos and pelicans all had their bills in him. He stood there, drying the plates, a captive audience to my mistress, as she gossiped about the tattered laundry hanging from the second-floor line, belonging, of course, to the lady below with the squirrel skin coat. Then, every evening while supper was on the stove, she'd command him to take me out for a walk, on the end of a string. If men knew how women pass the time when they are alone, they'd never marry. Her days were a predictable cycle: a cheap romance novel by Laura Jean Libbey, a bit of almond beauty cream for her neck, and the dishes left soaking in the sink. Throw in a long gossip with the iceman, a few old letters, some pickles and tonic, and an hour spent peering through the window shade into the neighbor's flat. That's about all there is to it. 20 minutes before his return, she straightens up the house, adjusts her hair frame so it won't show, and pulls out her needlework for a 10-minute bluff of industry. I led a dog's life in that flat. Most of the day I lay there in my corner, watching the fat woman kill time. I slept sometimes, and had daydreams about being out chasing cats into basements, and growling at old ladies with black mittens, as a dog was intended to do. Then she would pounce upon me with a lot of that senseless poodle chatter, and kiss me on the nose. But what could I do? A dog can't chew a clove to kill the scent. I began to feel sorry for hubby. Dog my cats if I didn't. We were 2 of a kind. We looked so much alike that people noticed it when we went out. So we shook the dust of the grand avenues where the millionaires' carriages roam, and took to climbing the frozen piles of grey December snow on the side streets where the common folk live. One evening, when we were thus promenading, and I was trying my best to look like a prize-winning St. Bernard, and the old man was trying to look like he wouldn't have strangled the first street musician he heard play Mendelssohn's Wedding March, I looked up at him and said, in my way, "What are you looking so sour about, you rough-edged old sailor? She don't kiss you. You don't have to sit on her lap and listen to talk that would make a cheap sitcom sound like the wisdom of the ancient Greeks. You ought to be thankful you're not a dog. Brace up, my married friend, and bid the blues begone." The matrimonial mishap looked down at me, with almost canine intelligence in his face. "Why, doggy," says he. "Good doggy. You almost look like you could speak. What is it, doggy? Cats?" Cats could speak, but, of course, he couldn't understand. Humans were denied the speech of animals. The only common ground of communication upon which dogs and men can get together is in fiction. In the flat across the hall from us lived a lady with a black and tan terrier. Her husband would dutifully leash him and take him out every evening, but he always came home cheerful and whistling. One day, I touched noses with the neighbor's terrier in the hall, and I cornered him for an explanation. "See here, wiggle and skip," I says. "You know that it ain't the nature of a real man to play nursemaid to a dog in public. I never saw a fellow leashed to a bow-wow yet that didn't look like he'd like to fight any other man that looked at him. But your boss comes in every day as perky and self-satisfied as an amateur magician who just pulled a rabbit out of a hat. How does he do it? Don't tell me he actually likes the walk." "Him," says the Black and Tam. "Why, he uses nature's own remedy. He gets spifflicated. At first, when we go out, he's as shy as a man at a high-stakes poker table who'd rather be playing a quiet game of cards at home. But after we've been in 8 saloons, he don't care whether the thing on the end of his line is a dog or a catfish. I've lost 2 inches of my tail trying to sidestep those heavy swinging doors. That tip I got from that terrier, a bit of vaudeville gold, if you please, set me to thinking. One evening, about 6 o'clock, my mistress ordered him to get busy and perform the ozone act for Lovey. I have concealed it until now, but that is what she called me. The Black and Tan was called Tweetness, so I suppose that I still have the upper hand on him there. Still, Lovey is something of a nomenclatural tin can, tied to the tail of one's self-respect. At a quiet place on a safe street, I tightened the line of my custodian in front of an attractive, refined saloon. I made a frantic scramble for the doors, whining with all the drama of a dog that heroically lets the family know that little Alice has fallen into the brook. "Why, darn my eyes," says the old man, with a grin, "if the yellow-furred son of a seltzer lemonade ain't asking me in to take a drink. Let me see. How long's it been since I rested my feet on a brass rail instead of pounding the pavement? I believe I knew I had him." He sat at the table and ordered a hot scotch, and then another. For an hour, he kept the drinks coming. I sat by his side, thumping my tail to call the waiter, and enjoying a free lunch that Mama could never match, with that store-bought food she pretended was homemade. When the products of Scotland were all exhausted except the rye bread, the old man untangled me from the table leg and reeled me outside, like a fisherman landing a salmon. Out there, he took off my collar and threw it into the street. "Poor doggy," says he, with a grin. "Good doggy. She won't kiss you any more. It's a darn shame. Good doggy. Go run off and take your chances with the streetcars. And be happy." I refused to leave. I leaped and frisked around the old man's legs, happy as a pug on a rug. "You old gray-headed rabbit chaser," I said to him. "You egg-stealing, moon-baying old hound. Can't you see that I don't want to leave you? Can't you see that we're both pups in the wood, and the missus is the cruel guardian? After you with the dish towel, and me with the flea medicine and pink bow. Why not cut that all out and be partners forevermore?" Maybe you'll say he didn't understand. Maybe he didn't. But the warmth of the hot scotches seemed to steady him, and he stood still for a minute, lost in thought. "Doggy," says he, finally, "we only get one life on this earth, and most of us waste the better part of it. If I ever go back to that apartment, I'm a fool. And if you go back, you're even fooler, and that's the honest truth. I'm betting 60-1 that heading west wins out, by the length of a dachshund." There was no string anymore, and I frolicked along with my master all the way to the 23rd Street ferry. and every cat along the route had reason to be thankful for their climbing claws, as I made sure they put them to good use. On the Jersey side, my master said to a stranger who stood eating a currant bun, "Me and my doggie, we are bound for the Rocky Mountains." But what pleased me most was when my old man pulled both of my ears until I let out a happy howl, and he said, "You common, monkey-headed, rat-tailed, sulphur-colored son of a doormat. Do you know what I'm going to call you now?" I thought of Lovey, and I whined dolefully. "I'm going to call you Pete," says my master. And if I'd had 5 tails, I couldn't have done enough wagging to do justice to the occasion. And here, dear listener, we conclude our reading of Memoirs of a Yellow Dog, written by O. Henry, and respectfully adapted for the modern listener. William Sidney Porter, the author behind the pen name of O. Henry, was a man of the shadows. Rather than frequenting the literary salons of his day, he was often found in the corner of a dim cafe, on a crowded park bench, nursing a drink, listening and observing. To O. Henry, the noise of the city wasn't just static. It was a symphony of individual voices, providing the fragments of irony he would later weave into his prose. By stepping into the pores of our narrator today, Porter applies that same urban observation to the domestic sphere, suggesting that, perhaps, the most honest witness to our lives is the one sitting silently at our feet. Memoirs of a Yellow Dog was first published in 1905 in the New York World Sunday magazine, and later immortalized as part of his series The 4 Million. At the time, New York was obsessed with labels, who belonged in the 400 and which breeds belonged in the parlor. This era of pedigree created a rigid, almost stifling atmosphere for the modern spirit. Porter found this social theater endlessly amusing. By choosing a narrator of uncertain lineage, a common scruffy yellow dog, he creates a deft irony. In a world obsessed with fancy names and velvet cushions, the most authentic and liberated character in the room is the one the pedigree crowd would likely overlook. And here perhaps we can leave with a warming thought. In the grand comedy of life, isn't it marvelous when we find someone, 2-legged or 4, who wants to run toward the horizon at the exact same pace we do? Thank you for listening. I look forward to sharing our next story with you very soon.